Joining me in the studio to talk about a host of different things, digital strategist Constantine Frantzeskos from PENSO. Good to have you back.
Great to be back.
Something has just popped up and I think will suit you very much because I know how much you love to travel. I know how much you have this affinity between Greece and Italy and the rest of Europe, but you're also well travelled in the sense that you understand that in order for the world to get out of COVID, we will need to find a global passport that will get us beyond the travel restrictions that we have at the moment. So how do we get the world travelling again? The Greeks have seen an opportunity and they've reached out to the United Kingdom and have said, you know what? Why don't we do vaccination passports that will allow you to come to the Greek islands and discover the magic of the Greek islands and at the same time forget all your travails and challenges that COVID has taken you and put you through. Now, Britain, France, America, all suffered tremendously and still suffering from COVID. Is this a plausible idea? Is this something that will suddenly get the borders, the international borders, open? And is this the way that we should consider going forward? Because I'm hearing a lot of Australians saying, global passport, a vaccination passport, yeah, can be done. But there's so much trouble out there with cyber criminals and whatever. You get a global passport out there, I'm going to find a way to get one. So how do we use the technology that's out there today to get on top of this and open the door and let us travel as we used, well, almost as we used to.
Well, it's this idea of this global travel passport. Again, the Greek tourism minister, Theo Harris, he's a visionary. He's someone who has got a software background. He's quite adept with his technical skills.
Yeah.
And he's basically opened up this idea of, okay, what's stopping people traveling? Okay, let's go back to the grassroots. Different countries are worried about the spread of COVID, obviously.
And different variants of the COVID.
Different variants of the COVID, but also different countries. We know Victoria in Australia, WA, Auckland, one case and they shut down for 5 days. So it's not just international travel, but it's how are we going to be treating the vaccinated people going forward? Will they be treated differently? And therefore, how do we verify that? So to go back to your question, this idea of a COVID vaccination passport isn't actually a new concept. It's been around since the 30s with what the UN calls the yellow card, or the carte jaune, I think it's called, where things like smallpox vaccinations or these sort of things are addressed on literally a yellow card.
To travel 30, 40 years ago to Asia, you needed a succession of shots before you got to the aeroplane. And it seems to me that we went through 15, 20 years of this magical new world of travel for a whole new marketplace or a new sector of the marketplace that had never had the opportunity to travel before. Yeah?
That's right.
Because we saw budget airlines come in and the people that normally would travel before were well-credentialed people, or they were professionals, or they were affluent, seriously affluent. The budget market didn't exist. Suddenly the budget market came and it did change world travel, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it also changed the way that people behaved.
Yeah.
No more 55 shots, inoculation, this, that and the other. And of course the health and hygiene in those countries that were suspect countries, and still are, if you really look at it, whenever I go overseas and we're filming, for example, the travel advisories are this long. They still are. They're not this long, it's this long. So what's changed? Is it our attitude?
Well, I think in the context of COVID, what's changed is that governments have really seen this as being an existential crisis rather than the idea of Bali belly or whatever it was called in those days. But one of the big problems that we've got is that back in those days, you might have had your different, as you said, 5 or 6 different shots before you got on the plane.
Yes.
But they were really,
you name it.
Yeah, but they were really for your benefit rather than necessarily the idea that you might somehow be a carrier of COVID. And so what I think's happened is, in looking for these COVID passports, COVID vaccination passports, it will allow, hopefully, countries to say, okay, we don't have a problem with you coming into the country because you've had your COVID passport. Or potentially even at an organisational level. In other words, will restaurants only be open to people who have a COVID passport? Or will schools only be open to children that had a COVID vaccination?
Or if you want to come to the convention or the World Congress, you're going to have to be vaccinated.
Precisely. But the problem that we've got at the moment is that every country has their vaccination certificates that are more or less a piece of paper, completely different standards, completely different pieces of paper. That, you know, I've had lots of friends on Facebook and Instagram say, you know, I've had the jab, not in Australia sadly, I've had the jab. They hold up their piece of paper. Whether you're in New York, or whether you're in Dubai, or whether you're anywhere in the world, they're completely different. So one of the key issues is, how do you build that universal standard?
Good
and
idea.
That's really what the Greek government's saying. Why don't we get together, build a standard, and the only way to build that global standard is to digitise it. Because if we have a piece of paper, firstly, it could be forged. We don't know what the provenance of that piece of paper is. So therefore, how do we ensure that we have some sort of digital
You touched on the
platform?
word provenance. That's something that we keep hearing about long with, there's a company that we did an interview with only a little while ago called Source Certain. Professionals, they're all about verification, and they use blockchain.
Yes.
Now, is this where you're leading me?
Absolutely. So the blockchain being a decentralised, verifiable source.
Yep.
And again, I'm not going to get into the details of how the blockchain works,
Yep.
but the reality is that it allows for a third-party, decentralised, verifiable, I'd say unbreakable way in which we could verify that these vaccinations have occurred, and have occurred through government or through whoever it might be, and so that we can then have a very, very, very quick way in which anyone at a passport control or in any organisation can verify that that person is who they say they are.
And do it in a manner, a speedy manner, that would allow the traveller to get on his way, not be sitting there for hours or days waiting for verification to come through.
That's exactly right, because at the moment I'm afraid that they're going to still be using telex machines.
Oh, what's a telex machine? But look, the theory of this and the initiative of the Greek government says to me that there is a way to beat the impasse, and the impasse is the world's been shocked into thinking differently and behaving differently. How do we get some surety? How do we get some confidence back in the marketplace? Now, the airlines, I'm sure, will see this as a viable way to get their business back up, and Lord knows they need it.
Absolutely.
Who would have ever imagined that our major airlines, and we're talking Emirates and others, who've had to cease travel, who've had to park aircraft in numbers that no one ever imagined was possible, they would be thinking, what a terrific initiative, let's get on top of it. And then I suppose the next question would be, how do they include it in their surveillance at the airport to and from? Yeah. So when you go in and board or check in, you'll have to have your blockchain to validate that indeed you have had the vaccination.
That's exactly it. And if we look at it again at a broad level, why is tourism, or why are the movement of people so important? Well, it's important for business, it's important for leisure, and let's not rule that out. But also the movement of people for personal reasons, because of family reasons, because they actually want to go and study in other countries.
Yeah, job opportunities galore.
You name it. And so it's vital for the world that we have a vehicle or a means to do that. Also, another thing that's really interesting at the moment is that freight. We actually see airlines as basically just the passengers.
No. There's a whole new business out there. It's called cargo and freight airlines doing gangbuster business.
Gangbusters, but the reason is because there's limited planes in the air.
Yeah.
So
most of the others are owned by Amazon.
Yeah, that's right. So it's so important for so many reasons that tourism and travel gets up and running, and this is a really sensible means to get that up and running.
Now, before we go, we've had a giant in the music industry in Australia, the man who founded a lifetime ago the mushroom company. Michael Gudinski, I first met him in '74. I was in Cairns in Far North Queensland, and he was travelling with a young guy called Shirl. I thought, strange name for a young man, but he was a tremendous young talent, and the two of them were quite a couple of larrikins and scallywags. But they certainly made their way. Shirl left us way too early, and Michael Gudinski, quite shockingly earlier this week. You had a run-in and an opportunity to do some work with Michael Gudinski, and give us a sense of the man and the character.
Yeah, well,
the larger-than-life guy.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, he was. Well, my family were in the hospitality and music industries. They had venues like the Metro and the Grain Store and Inflation back in the day. So
not Inflation.
So I was a little kid running around there, and Gudinski was larger than life even back then. But I think the thing about Gudinski that's so interesting and so amazing about his impact was that it wasn't just that he built a great business or a great life or a great family, or even made an impact on the industry. He was one of those people that transcended the industry. He was one of those people that acted as a real catalyst and a visionary for so many different things to happen. And he was the type of guy that always had this attitude of can. Let's make it happen. Now, I didn't deal with him a lot. I mean, I got to know the guy over a number of years. But one time that I did deal with him quite closely was in 2009, after the Black Saturday bushfires. On the Sunday night, I remember the horrible news coming through of what had happened the day before.
Yeah, we'd lost Brian Naylor.
And
his wife, yeah.
Awful.
Horrific.
Awful. And I had a number of friends that lost farms and properties and their livelihood. And I called a number of people on that Sunday night and emailed them and said, why don't we do something about this? And I know that there were literally hundreds and thousands of others that were doing the same thing. Yeah. And what happened was that with that small group of people, we had probably about 150 bands and a number of people kind of commit to our cause. And then we thought, gosh, this is we've actually got something here. We've got this. We've got the intent.
How do we deliver it?
Yeah. And we all kind of looked at each other. It was on the Tuesday night, and we said, Gudinski. He's the only person that could pull this off. So we had a meeting with Gudinski and his people on the Wednesday, and like a kind of a whirling dervish, a whirlwind, he said, of course we're going to make it happen. And within, I think it was less than a month, he put together, and he and his team, his amazing team there at Dundas Lane, and others put together what was Sound Relief. And that was, I think we raised just over close to 9 million on the day. And then a further, I can't tell you how many, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, through DVD sales. But you know, it went from this kind of idea to a concert that had bands that said they'd never come together again. It had Prince William and Prince Harry performing. It had the Bee Gees. It had, you name it. I mean, it was just one of the most incredible things. And Gudinski, you know, again, if you'd said, oh, we're going to put a concert on of that scale in less than a month, people would have thought you're mad. He made it happen, and he was the absolute driving force behind that.
His demise, his passing, has also driven someone we know, the boss, Bruce Springsteen, to write a song.
Incredible this morning.
Gudinski. So a state funeral is in the wind. The Victorian government has offered that to the family. I believe it's been accepted. It'll be one very special send-off. It'll be one very special memorial. Where would you like to see it done?
Well,
is the Palais too small?
Oh, far too small. I think the thing is, if you
Maya Music Bowl.
Well, let me put it this way: if Gudinski were running the show,
yeah,
where would he have it? I think MCG would be too small. You know, his vision would be a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, but no, via satellite, we could have the National Stadium in Sydney, the MCC, Wembley. Yeah. And the last venue for the Super Bowl. I mean, why not link it up via satellite?
Well, you know, the thing is, he brought a lot of joy to a lot of people, and when you think about it that way, that was his intent. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to bring Australian artists to Australians. And in that, the fact that he was able to make a lot of money out of it and do really well and build an amazing business, he needs to be sent off in a blaze of glory, I think.
Yeah, he was a very proud Australian, but an even prouder Victorian.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me just say, great to reminisce about someone so very special. But we want you to come and do this a little bit regularly. We want to be able to talk about the things that are changing the world, the ideas and the initiatives that are being taken up by business and by some tremendous developers, web developers and others, to excite people, because the world needs to be excited again, kicked into fast forward mode, because 2020 was just one of those years.
Well, there's a lot of fantastic ideas out there. There's a lot of talent, and there's a lot of really amazing things happening, especially in the digital space, in the creative space. So yeah, let's talk about it, George.
Constantine Frantzeskos from PENSO, digital strategist galore, and more importantly, someone who also loves his Victoria. And did I mention his Collingwood?